And so we have Jill Bama, who you've already heard is at Berea College, and I'll let Jill take it.
Great, thanks. It's always a challenge to teach at the lunch, I know, so I'm like, if you're nodding off, it's okay, I couldn't understand. What I'm going to do is show you a module that I have used almost since I started the project. I think the first time I put it together, I had data from 2000, then 08, then 12, and JP just sent me 2016 data. So it's a pretty tried and true module, and for my colleagues who've seen this many times, I apologize, but hopefully this will be good for you all. So what I want to do is, I used it in my social problems class, which is a 100 level course. So often that's a course that students are, it's very first year, first semester, and this is what they're getting. I have 20 students in my classes, and all my students have laptops, so that's a real luxury that we have. I don't know if your students have access to computers or computer labs like I know in Esther's classes. I usually take 4 to 5 days on this module, but you can cut it down to 2 to 3. You can adjust it any way you want it. I've learned more time is almost always better, and we're learning both content and quantitative skills, but you can adapt it any way you like. This is online, and you are welcome to use it and use any of the materials. So the substantive goals, I'm not just learning quantitative reasoning, but I'm also trying to get them to learn about sex and race differences in income. And by the time this ends, they really get it. They've seen it over and over. And in the process, they're making state and national level comparisons in terms of earnings using the ACS PUM. So this is 2012, 2016 data. So the skills that I'm hoping they get quantitatively is this very optimistic. They will create and read frequency tables, learn the logic of independent and dependent variables, create and interpret bivariate tables across tabs or contingency tables, learn to make database comparisons across states. And then finally, my mantra is they're telling a story with numbers. So I'm always saying you're telling a story, you're telling a story. You're not bludgeoning us with numbers, you're telling a story with numbers. So that's where I hope we end up with it. So I start the first day. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just run you kind of like I would do with my class. I'm going to go like my class, so I'll go faster, obviously. But on the first day, I walk in, and I don't think I heard anyone say, maybe Rachel a little bit, most students are afraid of this stuff. They don't like it. They're, oh, please don't show me numbers. And so I always go in and I hand up like, everyone love numbers by the end. And often I can't say they love it, but a lot of them don't hate it. I think we do these skills enough that they feel kind of empowered by the end. So on the first day, we just look at frequencies. We start here. I start by talking about what's a sample, what are variables, and I don't do that here, but you can do that. It doesn't take a long time. And then I start them into frequencies. So we're going to look at full-time, year-round workers of 2016, okay, using the ACS pubs. And so I always try to get them to guess. Before I show any data at all, I always try to get them to guess, because then it starts meaning something. And it's astonishing what they'll guess, okay? So I'll start with you all. I mean, really, it's really astonishing. So what do you think the sex composition is of a full-time, year-round workforce? 50-50? Anything want to guess? 60-40. Which way?
60 men.
Okay, anyone else? I had the same guess. Well, you are, in fact, almost exactly right. Okay. So 57% of the workforce is male, 42% is female, 43%. And then just a very simple frequency table. There's lots of ways to be. You'll discover them, or your students will. So just showing a really simple frequency table, the first thing I'll do is say, well, we have 2 sets of numbers. We have percentages and we have numbers. And which typically, to make comparisons, do you want to use? Percentages, right? You probably will too. In a class of 20, I'll always have 1 or 2 students who want to use numbers. And so I get a paper just full of, and I don't know if it's because it makes the paper longer, there's more pages. I kind of think that might be it. But I'm like, no, we really want to use percentages. And then there's one other key thing that is a surprise to some students, and that percentages should add up to 100%. And I don't mean to insult my students, but that really can be dues, okay? That, so when it's something they've got 30 and 35, I'm like, I know you didn't run this right. Why? Okay, so just very basic. It's really worth slowing it down, having them guess, going over sort of the basics. And they need to know what the base is. So the base here is all full-time, year-round workers. Okay, so we show up frequency, and then I immediately start saying, well, here's some common mistakes. So I show again the same set of frequencies here, and I'll ask, which of the following is true? Is it that 57% of the workforce is male, or 57% of men are in the workforce? When would say A? Oh, I've got a shy class, and no one say anything. Okay, well, the answer is A. Okay, 57% of the workforce is male. And this is actually subtle, and students will get screwed up with this. They'll tell me, less than half of women are working. Like, no, less than half of the workforce female. Okay, so that's really important to kind of look at that and talk about it, just so they understand that. What I do is in the handout, it'll show all the frequencies, and I'll say, okay, tell me, what does that 12% mean? Make them put it in a sentence. But the more you can kind of interact with them, the better. All right. So then that one was a little simple. Now we'll look at earnings of full-time workers. So again, I'll ask you to ask, what percentage, and this was totally news to me. Okay, so my research was in China way back when, so looking at this the first time I taught it was, I had no idea. So what percentage of full-time workers do you think earn over 100,000? Yes. 10%? What you said? 2%? Higher than that? Want to guess? 8%? 4%? 18%? Okay. So this is what's fun, right? We've got from 2 to 18% just in this room, and we're all PhDs, and this is exactly how I was. I totally didn't get this. So that's what's really fun about these data. You're learning it too. Well, the answer is, so we're guessing between 2 and 18% on this one. How about what percent make less than 25,000? 20%? 20? 40. Okay. 20 all the way up to 40. Anyone want to go under 20 or over 40? Okay. All right, so it's kind of fun. So always have the students guess, because then it starts meaning something. I just realized next time I'm going to do is give the top of the table and let them try to fill them in. But so here's what it looks like. Yeah, again, full-time year-round workers, individual earnings, okay? So I'm hearing people are saying surprised. What were you surprised by here? That so few people are earning above, or so many people are earning below, or what kind of strikes you here? There's no right or wrong here.
Well, I thought there would be more people below 25,000.
Yeah, I do too. So this is really interesting. I think next time what I'm going to do is fill in, just have the top of this and let them guess across the way. Just try, and then actually it's good. I'll let them fill it in, and they'll always add up to way over 100%, or so you can like, okay, we got to figure this out. But just with a really simple frequency table, you can teach a lot. And then we start talking about what does this mean. So you can start. Well, it looks like twice the proportion of people in this country earn less than 25 compared to over 100. I then say, well, let's socially construct income groups, because it's hard to think across 6 groups. So if you want to say low income, what would you, if you were to add in any of these, what would you say is a cutoff for low income?
34,000.
Maybe 34 and below. Okay. How about middle income? Maybe 35 to 99, 35 to 69. Okay. High income? 70 and above. So this is really interesting. Your students may give you different answers. My students, Berea College is only low-income students, so that if you don't know, all students, if their parents make above a certain amount, they can't get in. Okay, so that's our strictest criteria for getting in. Criterion is that they have to be low income. They all get full tuition scholarships. They all work. So we're a pretty unusual school. So when they see this, when I say what's rich, they often say 50,000 and above, and some will say 35,000 and above. And a few students will have 100 and above. But it's interesting, and I'll say you can make the cuts anywhere you want. You just have to define what you think is low, medium, and high. I typically just cut it in thirds there. Okay. So after we've looked at frequencies, then I say, okay, now let's start looking at 2 variables together. Let's look at binary tables. So I'll ask you, who do you think makes more, men or women? Someday, I don't think I'm going to teach long enough. I always joke with students, I hope by the time I retire, this is not such an obvious answer. Yeah. Right now it still is. So typically when we say men or more, what kind of data do we use? What are we comparing usually? Averages, yeah. For every dollar a man makes, a woman makes, whatever, or men on average earn 4,000, men earn 40, whatever it is. Right? So they're used to sometimes thinking in averages, and they're going to want to keep saying average here. And so you have to kind of say, we're not actually looking at averages. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a bivariate table. Given the 2 variables we just looked at, sex and income levels, we're going to look at something called a contingency table or a bivariate table. So did anyone guess that women would make more? Yeah. All right, so here's the answer. Or here's the data. How would you all interpret that? Who does make more? Excellent. Okay. So this is great. If you look at this, you have more women earning less and more men earning more. So one of the first things, that's exactly the way I would at least interpret it, okay? So the first thing you got to get students to do is where do you focus? And the first time I flash this table, they're like, ooh, okay, because it just looks like a lot of numbers. And so the first thing, and I don't know why, but a lot of students will, for some reason they really like this category. I don't know what it is, but they'll all say, no, women make more. Look, 21% of women. I've never quite figured out why, but they can get caught up in the middle. So what I'll say is, since we're looking at income, and most of us want to earn more rather than less, focus on who's at the top and who's at the bottom, and try to overlook the middle. It's not as important because you're moving out of the middle, either dropping or going up. So I tell them focus usually at the bottom and the top, and then I start looking again. And well, how do you interpret this? So I have so through common mistakes, and this is where I spend a huge part of my time is how do we read the percentages in these tables. So true or false? 21% of those who make 21.1% of those who make less than 25,000 are men. Earn a lot of false. Why might that be false? Bill?
Because 1% of males are earning.
How did you know that? How did you know that? You're right. You're exactly right. How did you know that? Winnie? Yeah. That's the key.
Sum it the other way. I think
Right.
for me, that would be the more intuitive way to know. Like, I know that 21 plus 26 is not going to sum to 23.
Right.
If, like, someone who doesn't know how to read a table, I think that would be the more
Right.
intuitive.
Right. And I tell students, because on our faculty floor, we'll occasionally have tables up and faculty read them wrong. Right? They want to read this as 21% of those are earning 25,000 or less. And that's really common to do this, and we're all going to do it. So that's the key. I teach them, we got to figure out which way are they percentaging? Are they percentaging across? In other words, are they adding over to 100% or down? And they learn pretty quickly in these tables it's going to earn that. So that anything is going down like this, you'd say 21% of the column category. Okay, so that's 21.1% of men. So that's false, this one. Is this true or false? 13.8% of men make between 25 and 34,000. That's true. Good. How about this one? 17.8% of women earn 70,000 or more. Can I add down? Okay, you're saying yes. Why?
We're summing them down.
Because I'm just summing down a column as adding to 100%. So I can do that. I can add down because all of these are the same base. These are adding to 100%. So I can add down 17.8%. Okay? How about, can I add across? 22.9% of men and women earn more than 100,000. Yeah, you're shaking. Did I add it up wrong? Yeah, 22.9%. Can I add across? No, I can't. Why not? Yeah, the answer is actually, it's right there, right? It's right here, 12%. Okay? But a lot of times they don't recognize that. Okay? And so they think they can add it. And when we get to a more complex table, that's harder to see. Okay? Just these. The first time I start with a true-false test, I have, and I think it's online, use it. I never get a single person to get them all right. I'll have science majors, I'll have a couple math majors sometimes. I will sometimes get one person who comes close, but often I can fool them on every single one. They'll think everything is true. You can add across, you can add down, you can, and so again, and I've had colleagues who do this wrong. Okay, they're not totally intuitive, right? We pick it out, we read it. So if you can, this is where I feel like I have great success because I give them a pre-test, which I'll show you at the very end, on the first day of class, and I have a lot of questions and they all miss it. And then I give that exact same test on the final, and they almost all get it. So at least this kind of simple skill, which really isn't simple, right? How to read a table, they learn if you practice enough and make mistakes. Let them make mistakes. I'll flip the tables both ways. So what I will eventually do in a practice session, I'll take this table, I'll flip it this way, keep think the percentage is proper, I'll leave it this way and percentage across, or percentage down, percentage across. I'll do it all 4 ways you could do, and then I'll tell them how do I read this each time. Okay, but it's really worth trying to read through this. Okay, so then I then say, okay, now that we know how to read individual statistics in here, I'll just pull statistics out and say, okay, 21.1%. Somebody use that. Could you use that, Emery, in the sentence? 21.1%.
Balance or earning.
Exactly. And usually I'm like, oh, that was beautiful. Okay. Ham it up, give them lots of credit. Sometimes we clap, and if it's wrong, I'm like, again, until they get it, I'll make faces. I mean, if you've ever had visions of being an actor or actress, here's your chance. Okay, and so over the many years I've taught this, I have come up with my own rules. I didn't know I had them, and I suggest if you start teaching these, you will have your own rules that you keep grading things that are wrong. So start keeping track of your own rules. And so I just tell them now, because I call them Baumer's rules. It's very formulaic, and I like, follow my rules, and you can make a good grade. So I tell them it's 3 parts to describe a table. The first is to have a general statement, no numbers. Okay, just like you said, women fall into the low-income categories, men seem to fall into the high-income categories. Or even more simply, men are more than women. Okay, opening statement, then you use the statistics to back it up. And then if it's a complex table, you have a summary. So that's what I do. I just say, this is what every time you have a table, I want to start with a general statement. And this is your take home. If they don't remember anything else, what will they remember? What was your, the big lesson of your table? And so I have them often read tables aloud, read their descriptions. So they'll finish and they'll say, okay, what was the take home? And if the student can't remember, I'm like, okay, you probably need to work on that some more. And again, this one's a pretty simple one. I teach them some useful phrases. A disproportionately high percentage of women fall into low-income categories. You'll discover the language and that you don't like, and it's worth keeping track of that. Keep your notes, and I have eventually just developed Baumer's rules, and I give that to them, and it becomes a bit, formulaic. But I'm like, I don't care if you can follow the formula for now. You can add the bells and whistles later. And I just tell them, you're telling a story. And I'll say to them, how often have you heard someone start using numbers, and what's your typical response when people talk? And they all are like, yeah, so you don't want to do that. You want people to take home your message. And then I also ask them, how many of you tend to believe numbers? When you hear numbers, you think people are right. And even though they hate them, they're like, well, yeah. Like, well, I want you to know how to use numbers so that you have power. So that you seem legitimate. And I also want you to be able to understand others, so perhaps you can take one of those arguments. And the more you kind of cheerlead and tell them this, I find they sort of feel empowered. So again, over time, you really watch their confidence and as well as skills increase. Okay, so now we're going to look at race differences earnings. So we talk about the social construction of race. Here are the categories in PUMS, which are a little different than ACS. But non-Hispanic white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, Native American, non-Hispanic other, and non-Hispanic multi. Okay, given those categories, what do you think the racial composition of the workforce is? This is always a really fun one. And let's just pick a category. How about non-Hispanic white? What percentage of the workforce do you think? 70? You're not that high? Can we drop it a little bit? 60? 60? Okay, so we've got 60 to 70. Good. Any other guesses?
75.
75? 60 to 75? Okay. How about Black, African American? 7? And then we'll go lower or higher? 15? Okay, 7 to 15. How about Asian? 1. Okay. 5. Okay. 3. Okay, so 1 to 5. Native American or Latino, Hispanic? I didn't add them up. Let's see. Right. Again, it's fun to put this on a board and fill them in, and you can see it. Like, okay, we got to get to 100. Yeah, well, you can see. It's depending on where you live, where your students come from. My students, we have a pretty bimodal group. We have students who come from very white Appalachia. And then our African American students and students of color usually come from urban areas. So my white students will be saying, what's the workforce like 90% white? And my students of color will be saying 60% white, 50% white. So it's really what you see often is what. And so this is really useful. Though my students should know this because I've taught them or tried what is the racial composition in the U.S. So I'm always hoping they'll get something close to that. All right. So the answer is you all were quite close. Yeah. Does anyone know how this does compare to the racial composition? It's quite close. The whites are slightly overrepresented. It's really about 61%. African Americans slightly underrepresented. It's about 12, 13. Hispanic is about 17. Native Americans a little less than 1. This is a slight overrepresentation. Asians about 5. But it very closely represents the racial composition. So again, this is a really good way to reinforce this if you've been teaching this in your lower level courses or any course in sociology. I'm always just totally dismayed. I'll have a senior or so in this class who snuck in and they'll blow this. I'm like, could you be a sociologist and not know this? Okay, but again, you're doing, just using these data, you're doing a lot of good reinforcement of basic stuff they should be learning in Soc, or any of our courses really. Okay, so now we're going to look at racial differences in earnings. And we're going to get a nice big table. Anyone want to guess which group earns the most? And who earns the least? Whites earn the most, and Asians earn the most. This is 2016 U.S. full-time year-round workforce. Okay, so this is really interesting. This is not a simple story. This is when you have all the I's crossed. Oh. I'm surprised not. Okay, so just looking at this, realize how complex this is, right? Anyone want to give me an opening statement? No, that's not the answer I'm looking for. You just say, this is so cool. Yeah, so again, come on. Okay, so yeah, if we look at, we find Asians are disproportionately in the high, and Native Americans and perhaps Hispanics are disproportionately in the income categories. Okay. Yeah, and often my students will simplify it, just say Asians and whites. They'll often say make the most. Native Americans and Hispanics make the least. Okay, so that's an opening statement, and that's something I want people to remember. Okay. Now, how would you bring in the data? You want to give me a statement? So let's take the first one. Asians make the most. Someone give me a statement that would back that up. Okay, so where am I? 21% of Asians earn 100,000 or more. And then you might want to say compare to, right? Just so that we can see it's a whole lot more. You might want to handpick a few. But you can see, when I do the gender one, the sex one, I get kind of the same story over and over. With this one, you can tell, everyone can tell a somewhat different story, depending on what they see, as long as they bring in the data to back it up. Yes?
For lots of these things, like you can kind of see them in shape, right? Asian is hourglass shape, but then all the other ones.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but that's a really nice way to look at it. Yeah. Okay, so this was kind of fun. This is worth taking quite a bit of time on. And again, when you first flash it, I mean, just like you did, it's like, oh, where? But they'll get really good at reading this table because we're going to see it times 20. And they'll be able to pick it out and tell the story pretty quickly. Okay, but it's really worth looking at this in different ways and then figuring out how you want to tell the story. So when I teach this module, I just run you through my first day. This is what I would do. I would teach them what's a sample, what are variables, what are frequencies, what's a bivariate table, how do we read a bivariate table. We end on this, we try talking aloud, and I say, okay, for the next class, which is 2 days later, I want a paragraph describing this table. Okay, so they have, and it's in their it's the last page of a module or of a handout. And I say, so write this up. And you got Bauman's rules, opening statement, describe it with data, summarize it. Okay. I will take that up. Again, I only have 20 students. I will take it up and give feedback. I write it, but I don't grade it. And that takes the fear off them. I'm like, take your chances, take risks, write a lot, tell me a story. Don't just be, really conservative with it. Because I'll give you all the feedback, because I'm just going to go straight into a paper. What I'm leaning toward is a small research data paper that has an intro, a lit review, methods, or sample data and conclusion. So on that first day, I also say I want a 1-paragraph lit review. So find an article that looks at race and gender income and difference in income and summarize it. So I ask for a 1-paragraph summary of any article that looks at these issues, plus a description of this table. And I don't grade it. So I just give them feedback. And that's hard, right? Because my students, this is their first semester in college. I just find an article. And I think what I'm going to start doing probably is giving them an article. But our text has some good stuff. Like, hey, these are texts. But that's you wouldn't have to do that if you don't want such a big assignment. But getting them the first time to write this for you, and if you don't have an enormous class or you can just go through it quickly, it's worth it. I don't really mind reading so much if it's just for feedback. It's the reading part I hate. So that's where I end the first day. They're all working on it and muttering, and some are thinking it's funny, and some are going, oh. I'm like, I promise you, 3 days for classes from now, you are going to be giving this stuff out. So that's where I end the first day. Okay, then what I do is we come in the next day, and I say, okay, I'm going to repeat what we just did. That was the U.S. I'm going to have them do it on their own state. So they're going to look at the effect of sex on earnings, race on earnings. We'll have talked about independent, which is the independent variable here? Yeah, independent are sex and race, and earnings are the dependent. Okay, so we'll talk about that. That's in the handout as well, and so we'll talk about that a little more. I'll have them make hypotheses. Who do you think earns more, men or women? Which group makes the most? Which group makes the least? And then I'm going to show them how to run the frequencies. I will give them a lot of instructions on how to make a proper table as well. And in the end, I tell them, we're working hard to tell a story. And it's going to end up being, I would say 4 to 6 pages, but it's really more like 6, because it has a lot of tables. All right. So what I do, and JP has already shown me this, so this is great. We take you straight into this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to run this for Kentucky, and then I'm going to ask you all to do it for your own state. And then it's kind of fun. You go around the country and look at. So if you want to get back into sscan.net and go to, I guess it's the data, right? Or WebShow. Pardon?
Data console.
That counts, and then WebShow, because I'm right into it. So, and this is actually, it looks different here than it will on your computer a little bit. But this is what you were into earlier this morning, right? And so I'm just going to take you into a different data set. So is everyone there yet? Okay, so I'm going to go into the Geo 2016. Go to Geo 2016. And yours, I think yours will look different. You're on your computer, it'll look different as projecting. And then under the data set, I'm going to choose Kentucky. And you can see that the suffix of all of these data sets is the state code. And the one that says earn.states is all states. So I'm going to choose Kentucky. You can choose your state. And then I'm going to hit compute marginals just to see the frequencies. So if you remember what the U.S. looked like for the full-time year-round workforce, how does Kentucky compare?
It's bigger, much higher percentage.
Yeah, much. See that better? Yeah, so as soon as I show this, we all kind of gasp, wow, we all knew this was a white state, sure enough. And I can say, I was looking at 2012 data just this past semester, and this was 90%. So I can always tell them, and before that it was 92%. So I can tell them from what I'm watching, I am watching demographic change across our state. They don't see it, but I can always report that. We see that the sex composition is very similar. Do you remember, that's age, do you remember the kind of the breakdown for income? So how do earnings look in Kentucky? Can you all see that as such? Is that? So is Kentucky richer or poorer than the U.S. overall? Or surprise, it's poor. Okay. So then I run, and I think you've done that, but we're going to run crosstabs. So again, I will spend some time talking about where do you put the row in a column for ease right now. I just tell them, put your dependent variable in the row, put your independent in a column, and then control down, or percentage down. But I show them, I flip it all around and show what happens. And invariably, they don't follow directions anyway, so you'll find out when that doesn't happen. I'm going to say percentage down, and then here's what Kentucky looks like. So what I would suggest you all do, I think it's in handout 2. It will walk you through it if you wanted to see your own state. Look at the differences by sex and differences by income. And what's very interesting to see is the sex differences is always the same story, men make more. Income changes as you move around. And one of the things that's fun for students is to see if they can find the most racially diverse state. I'll tell you, it's kind of fun. And which is anyone want to guess the most the racially homogeneous?
Utah.
I don't know. I think it's Vermont. Oh,
Yeah.
And also West Virginia, I think. But I think it is Vermont, yeah. And so it's kind of fun. I mean, students are, get them interested in what these mean, and they're all searching for it. And then they try to see if they can find, the one that has the highest set of income. And anyways, it's kind of fun. So if you all want to look at your state for a moment and play around with it. And I need to get anyone in on me. Okay, it's always sort of fun to like. Race. I don't typically do controls with this.
Something like this.
Anyone come from a state that's more diverse than the U.S. overall? Pardon? California? Yeah. So it's Florida.
Stated down.
That's great. I'm not sure.
I learned a lot of stuff. Yeah. That you could not go bonkers. That's wrong.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun.
Like,
I'll ask you
if she gets
to
walk in,
check around and say, where would you like to live? It's kind of fun for them moving around.
Yeah, that'd be fine. I mean, she's
So does anyone have anything from their state that they looked at they'd like to report out? is it more or less diverse? Yeah, okay.
Pretty diverse, but state like the black going 3.5% at the state, even though it's like 13%.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is really, again, these data are great for students because they know their neighborhoods, right? But then they put it in a whole state context, and it's really revealing. Yeah, anyone else? Yeah. Uh-huh. Right, right. Yeah.
I was surprised in New York State that amongst that highest earner category, it's actually
Okay. So whites are actually earning more than Asians. Right. Okay. Right. Because it's not really among the high income earners, right? Because that would mean you're actually
right. Yeah.
percentaging across. But it's like we're saying that we see a higher percentage of whites than Asians are earning above 100,000 or whatever it is. Yeah. Anyone else?
I'm not from Maine, but I did discover that it's whiter than Vermont.
Oh, wow. What percentage?
95.5%.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I've had students, my students that call African American students have looked at DC and think I would like to live there. Spanish students that have looked at California and said that looks more, I would feel more comfortable there. I mean, our students up in Kentucky, our college is over 25% students of color, but we're just. So it's interesting to look at this and then to look at income. So did anyone find a pattern of income different than what we saw for the states? Or we saw Asians or anything else? Any different story?
Michigan, who are making more than $100,000, twice as much as the whites.
Uh-huh. Oh, wow. Okay, let's take a look at that, Michigan. This is, I have my own.
Listen,
Yeah.
11% compared to.
Oh, wow, yeah. Wow. And you know what I need to do? Let me put the numbers in so we can see how large. That's the other thing. This doesn't, if you hit frequency to go down, it'll show you how many people are in it, so you have some idea. So it's here's the base. So look how small the number of, well, I mean, it's awesome. But you got a much smaller base here than white, so that's just useful to know. When my students make their tables, they always have to put the numbers in them. But yeah, wow, you really see a difference there. And again, this is a small group, but they're definitely underrepresented in mine. Okay, so you can do a lot with these, and these tables are complex, and it takes a lot of practice reading them. My students become very kind of helpful with one of the camaraderie, collegial with one another, helping them out, talking about it, writing about it. So any other comments anyone wants to? We spent a whole day now doing this. Students are pulling them up, they're looking at it, they're kind of reporting out, I'm moving around, and they get into it. I have them make the hypotheses first. What do you think you're going to find in your state? I usually have them all, they can either work in pairs on the same state or they just start picking states, but it's fun to have a lot of different states going on in the classroom. So this is what we would do our second day. And then the next day, so this is what we would do, and you've got that handout now. And again, you're welcome to use any of this adapted any way you like. Cool. On my third day, and you could skip this depending on how much you're working up toward a paper, but what I do is I have them come in and they have to present it. So they come up in pairs, and I say, you've got 5 minutes, so tell us, give a hypothesis. Usually we do it on race because it's the same story over and over and over, I'm sad to say, for sex. Who do you think makes the most? Who do you think makes the least? Or who did you think going in? Show us that table and describe it. And by about the 5th group, they've got the language down. You know, a general statement. Occasionally they'll make a statement we don't agree with, and then they have to really back it up. Almost always one group will have run it wrong, and I just let them talk it through until someone says, is that right? I got the table backwards, which is really instructive. I always want someone to do it so that the students will figure it out. Like, something doesn't look right. I did have one student come running in and say, I found a state where women make more. I'm like, really? Yeah, they showed it. Like, what do you think, class? And sure enough, they run it backwards. And so I kind of mangled the numbers. But it's great. Those kinds of, I will sometimes go in and put a table of our own as well and just say, hey, look what I found. And it'll take a little while for them to figure that out. Okay, so then that's my third day is where they are just describing it to each other. And I'm trying to make the comparisons across states. How does this compare to Kentucky or to the U.S. or whatever? Okay, the fourth day, depending on how much time you have, this year for the fourth day, I said, okay, everyone come together. And so they brought in their questions, they worked on it, I could answer questions, so they just had a whole work day in class. And I did a quiz a day, so we had something on. But they have to be there, so that counts. And then this year, my fifth day was to actually do a peer review of that paper. But that's a lot of time. If you don't you can get that time, you can drop this. But I will say, when you give an extra day, they do better. So I have them come to class with a completed draft. Again, this is a large assignment. Yes.
I'm sorry. How long is your day?
We used to have 50 minutes. Now we have an hour and 10.
So if I have 3.5 hours,
You can do that.
So
Yeah, you can do that. And again, you can expand or contract this to fit the time you want. So I would think my students tend to get hung up on the lit review. So if you don't want that part, you can take that out.
I had a question on that, because I guess now as a graduate student, I'm so used to finding literature for myself. But I also, when I think about teaching, I was like, I could give this to an undergrad. They don't know what a diff model is. I just skip that part. But how do you provide, here's a list of articles that either don't have, that are descriptive?
Right, that would have been a better idea. Often what they find is they almost find something through research or scholar.
But even though, you can put some.
And they manage, they're so good at having things out of abstracts and stuff. Because there's someone's got to be a paragraph. They can't cheat. I mean, they can't just got to cite properly. But it is hard. And our book, the textbook I use, actually has stuff they can cite. They read that chapter then.
Okay. So this is just a paragraph. They don't have to have an in-depth understanding.
No. I mean, it's just everything they find should say men earn more than women. Whites and Asians tend to earn more. And it'll provide some of the reasons why and more in depth. But I just want them seeing this isn't just something you're seeing. There's other, you're standing on the shoulders of giants. Others have done this too. But if you wanted to cut stuff out and just focus on data, if you got rid of the lit review and that part of the paper, that would shorten things. I have them review. And again, telling a story. So my assessment of this, I use two forms. One is a pre and post test, and I think it's actually in your folder at the end. And then the paper, which I use a rubric, which I think is at the end of the second handout. And I try to put their skills and their confidence. So on that, on the pre and post test, you'll see there's a little grid that just says how comfortable do you feel doing these various skills. And what I find is over time, they really do, that their skills and their confidence levels go up. So just to show you, this was on this past semester when I used this. The average class score was a 65%, so I made 65. Okay, so that was just walking in the first day. And I tell them, the worse you do, the better I'm going to feel later. So do not worry about failing this. I'm not rating it. You do terrible, and I'll actually feel good that it's just fine. So I really try to allay their fears about that first day. So that was on the pre-test, and it's got 22 points worth, and the range was from 11 to 18 on that pre-test. On the post-test, which was on their final, it was a 90%, and that was actually low this year.
wow.
But it really goes up. It's I think I changed the state. I used I think the first day in Alaska, I think, but all I do is change the state. Everything else is the same. And it's very obvious. And I do this module in the middle, so it's not as if they just did it, when then there's the final. So from the assessment, I really see improvement in these basic skills. And I also see their confidence go up. I mean, sometimes I almost have over-empowered them. They really think, I'm not that good. But it is nice to see them, and they really feel like, oh, yeah, I learned something. For the paper, it's a hard paper. You can imagine having both a lit review and intro, conclusion. I have 20 students. This is easier. But the day of their peer review, they are in pairs, and I would say, okay, Mark, everyone look at your paper, pick the messiest, ugliest, worst paragraph you have and mark it. And then I say, okay, mark it. I'm going to speed read everyone's paper, one paragraph. So choose the one you want. Don't pick a good one. Pick the one you need. And I'm always surprised at the intro. Like, anyway, they can choose whatever one they want. And I go person by person, and I sit down, I mark it up and write it. Say, this is what you need. And I can see errors, and then at the end, I can say, okay, folks, work on this, work on this, work on this. But I have found that helps. But it is a difficult paper, especially because this can be their very first semester at college. The skills, the really good writers actually tend to be pretty good at those. They're very good. I mean, you all know what this. We have clusters of skills. Peer review does help, not because they're such great peer reviewers, but because they've written a paper that night instead of the night before the turn in, right? So it's like 3 days earlier. I used to give rewrites for students who made a D or an F. I don't get D's or F's anymore. I don't know if I've gotten better, if they've gotten better, if they just, I don't know. I've gotten better at teaching it, or I don't know, but anyway, they've just gotten better. They do say it's difficult, but worth it. So here's some comments. These are from evals like several years ago, and then I'll show you more recent ones. I worked a lot in this class and was always taken to the brink of overwhelm, but not crossing over. I think this is a sign of an excellent class. The data analysis we did was a particular challenge. I came away from the exercise knowing I learned something completely out of my comfort zone. This is on that anonymous, evaluations at the end of the term. One said, keep on trying with data analysis. We need it, no matter how badly we don't like it at first. They're pretty honest. And then this year, at the end, on the last day of class, I often give a list of all the books and all the assignments, everything I give, and I ask for feedback and say, tell me what I should keep, what I should get rid of, what you like, what you learned, what was the most useful. And they're very honest. And so here's all the things they said about data analysis. It was very helpful. Glad you made us do it. Data analysis. I love this paper. I learned so much, and it made me switch from chem to soch. That's a good one. I'm just pretty proud of that one. So I'm like, child, if you like chem, you probably mistake it. But anyway, she's going to be better as a soch major. But that was kind of particularly proud of that one. Data analysis allowed me to effectively read and report data. I tell the students as well, they can use these databases in our gen ed courses where they look at inequality, and some do, and I'll often have faculty come and say, well, what are you doing over this? Really cool stuff, your students. So I tell them, take this, use it. And the few who do are, really are kind of on fire with it. I got no negative comments about data analysis, which was, again, kind of amazing, right? Because I got lots of other stuff they did not like. They're very honest. So again, students really do seem to like this. For the module, again, I've been using it for many years. Cheerleading is probably my most honed skill, to just keep saying, you can do this, you're going to like this. And it is nice, when you hear on the third day a student describing it, you're like, listen to this. You all can now do this. You look at how well you're describing it. It's fun to teach. It's hands-on. Students do typically like it. The pre and post test shows that they learn. And the exams and papers reinforce the skills. This, again, is I teach this their first or second semester at college, typically. I see them later because I teach the methods and stats series. And most of them, they can oh, is this like what we did? We do this many times over and over courses. But I really do see the accumulation of these skills. So that, for me, is quite satisfying. So again, my tips, if you can give more time, you'll always be grateful, because but that's true for every single thing we teach. Ungraded feedback has become my best friend, and perhaps theirs. I mean, we all hate grading, right? That's what it pays us. Like, we teach for grading is miserable. And so if you don't have to grade it somehow, and again, it depends on how big your classes are, but if I can give them, and I can shoot through these things in 10 minutes, because I know what I'm looking for. And this is pretty formulaic. It's not as if, but I just find if I can do that, and sometimes they just don't give it to you. You're like, well, I didn't read it badly, but you missed your chance for my feedback. The more they can practice, I have them read loud, I have them present, I have them share with each other, and I'll say to them, if you want to give me that paper early, I'll look at it and give you ungraded. They never do, right? Because they're all too busy, but I'm open to it, though I won't take it over email. I don't, because I can't stand reading. That's me. I'm weird. I need to write on paper, but I'm old school, so. But that's just me. Anyone, others love doing it that way.
I find you have to give them a deadline as to how early.
Yeah.
I did that once with an assignment, like the first writing assignment they had, and it was like an hour before. It was like the night before it was due. I'm getting like 40 of them.
Yeah.
I don't have the
Yeah, no. And I wouldn't, again, I do that with almost nothing. I will rarely pick something. I'm like, you know how to come to my office hours, how, but for the students who are really struggling, I'll say, and I'll just keep working with them. Expect them to say, if you're going to make them and they're going to make them, that is totally fine. In fact, if they don't make them, I start making them because I want them to catch it or to see it. Sometimes it's not accidental I'm making them. Or it is accidental. If you require paper, try to break it up. But the first time I had the paper, that's when I was having lots of rewrites because it was overwhelming. They were doing it the night before. They didn't know what kind of write an intro or a lit or a conclusion it was really kind of it was a mess. And so having broken it up, I want a lit review this day. I want to give me one paragraph, and I usually try to get them to do one on race because that's the most difficult. That seems to help. And I just cheerlead a lot. So what the module includes, you've got the 2 handouts. I think online there's a true-false test I've developed. It's with a different data set. I think it's from 2012. It doesn't matter. I've got my own rules. You will probably develop your own peer review guidelines and a rubric, and then my pre and post test. So if this something like this works for you, I developed this from someone else who had, I've changed it a lot, but these are already online. You can import these things directly for an intro level class. These modules can be quite nice, and you can sort of see. Also, when you're making them, more directions is always helpful. Okay, so I'm sorry I didn't want to do that, but so any questions? Yes.
When you start working with branding, are you doing because I could see you saying someone, even with the instructions.
Yeah, we do it in class the first day. So they're all in class. But I always have some students who miss. And I'm like, well, figure it out, you don't want to bring it in. And as long as you have click this, click that, every single thing, they can get it. Not beautifully, but they can do it. But I like to do the first time in class with demonstration. Well, thank you.